It was a long time, 20 years in all, that the ark remained at Kiriath-Jearim, and all the people of Israel mourned and sought after the Lord. So I guess this state of affairs has finally gotten to them. The ark was captured, and they have it back. They didn't do anything to get it back. It was delivered back to them. But it doesn't have a proper home, doesn't have a proper house, doesn't have a proper tent. The tabernacle is MIA. Shiloh is abandoned or destroyed. There is no high priest, no functioning priesthood. Apparently, it's taken time, but apparently they are getting legitimately upset about this turn of events. And Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, "If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtaroths, and commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines." So the Israelites put away their Baals and their Ashtaroths and served the Lord only. How many times have we seen them do this? How many times have we seen them get rid of their foreign gods and worship the Lord? Even Jacob did this. When Jacob moved back into the land after being in Laban's household, Rachel brought these idols with her. And apparently, he kept them for a number of times before he finally got rid of them, before he finally buried them after a while. But not immediately, after a while. So they've always had problems of wanting to have these other gods, these other idols. So you see this reference to getting rid of their foreign gods. And they do it. They will do it, but they'll always bring it back again later. Then Samuel said, "Assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you." When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed. They're probably... well, this is probably some sort of makeshift improvisation of their normal, yearly festivals. So there's no, this is not a specific, this is not, whatever they're doing here, they're not necessarily, it's not one of their typical worship days or feast days or whatever, but it's some sort of assembly that they're having that Samuel is calling together at this point in time, in the pattern of that maybe. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." And Samuel was leader of Israel at Mizpah, or judge. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. So they think Israel is gathered for war. Israel is not gathered for war. In this case, actually, they're not here for that. But the Philistines assume they are. And when the Israelites heard of this, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us in the hand of the Philistines." Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it up as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord in Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. Samuel is serving here as some kind of an unofficial priest. Samuel was actually not of the priestly line. He was a Levite, but he was not of the priestly line. However, he seems to be functioning as a sort of unofficial priest. I mean, there is no priesthood right now. Eli died. The Ark of the Covenant has been moved. The tabernacle apparently has been taken apart. I don't know where it went. The Shiloh has been abandoned as a religious site. There is no functioning priesthood right now. Samuel is kind of serving as a priest, even though he's not of a legitimate priestly line. And apparently this is okay. Like, God doesn't condemn him for it. No one yells at him for it. So I guess in this period of time, in this chaos that's going on here in Israel at this point, Samuel has been granted permission to function as an unofficial priest temporarily, I guess. It's hard to say. I mean, he's clearly functioning as a priest here, despite not being in the priestly line, and this seems to be okay. So we really don't know. It's hard to say. Samuel kind of functions as a priest, prophet, judge hybrid, which no one else would ever do until the time of Christ. You know, Jesus Christ himself is the only other person who fulfills all three of those roles. So he's in good company, I guess. But no one seems to have a problem with Samuel doing this, even though he's not actually a priest. So while Samuel was sacrificed, I guess there are no other priests. I guess right now there is no other priesthood. I don't know. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. So they're doing it even as they're offering the sacrifices. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines, and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth-Kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shem. He named it Ebenezer, which means stone of help, saying, "Thus far has the Lord helped us." So the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again, at least not at that point in time. The Philistines are by no means done. We're going to be fighting them down in the days of David. Okay, so we got a lot more to do with these Philistines. We're nowhere near done with them. But at this point in time, they are subdued. Throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to her, and Israel delivered the neighboring territory from the power of the Philistines. And there was peace between Israel and the Amorites, another major recurring enemy. Samuel continued as judge over Israel all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also judged Israel. And he built an altar there to the Lord, which again, I guess is okay. I don't know. You know, they're not really supposed to do that, but it doesn't seem as though he's being condemned for doing it. So they got the ark back. It's in Kiryat Jearim. They've cleansed themselves. They've repented. They fought off the Philistines. Things are stable. They have peace. They don't have a functioning priesthood still. The ark is still out of place in this Kiryat Jearim. It's not really supposed to be there. I don't know where the tabernacle got to. Shiloh's been abandoned as a religious site for whatever the reason. So things are still not functioning like they should. But they have a judge who travels around and makes a circuit of judgeship. They fought off the Philistines. They have peace with the Amorites. They're doing okay. They have peace at least and stability, although there are still lingering issues. And one of those is what's going to happen when Samuel is no longer around. Let's read. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. And they served at Beersheba, that's way down in the south. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So Samuel has the same problem that Eli had, in that he has unworthy sons. So what do we do now? We saw what happened to Eli and his family. What's Samuel going to do? What are they going to do now? They don't have anybody to turn the leadership over to once Samuel is gone that they can trust. What are they going to do? So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now, appoint a king to lead us, or to judge us, such as all the other countries have, all the other nations have. That's the key line right there. Such as all the other nations have. It's one thing to want a king. God wants them to have a king. He wants to be their king. But they want a king like the other nations have kings. They want to be like the nations around them. That's what they want. That is their mistake here. That is the mistaken intent here. Is to want the king to be like the other nations. It wasn't really a problem for them to want a king. God wanted them to have a king. He wanted to be their king. But they wanted a king like the other nations had kings. And that was the problem. But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord told him, "Listen to all the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected." So he was feeling personally rejected by this. He was displeased because he felt that they were rejecting him as their leader. But it's not him they've rejected, that they have rejected me, the God as their king. That's what they rejected. God wanted to be their king. But they rejected Samuel as their judge, not his sons really, but they rejected God as their king. Samuel took it personally. But God is telling him not to take it personally. Their motives are to be like the other nations around them. They rejected me as their king. I wanted to be their king. God wanted to be their king. That was the relationship he wanted to have with them. But they rejected that. Now they want a king like the other nations around them. So that's who they really rejected, not you, Samuel. "As they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt up until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do." Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. They're going to be meat shields for him when he goes into battle, in other words. They're going to take the arrows that are meant for the king. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots." He's going to force your sons into doing his work for him. "He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants." This, of course, is on top of the tenth they were supposed to offer to the Levites. "Your men servants and maidservants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, and the Lord will not answer you in that day." So that's what the kings of the nations are like. If you want a king to be like the other nations, that's what he's going to be like. Do you really want this king? The people refused to listen to Samuel. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, and with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battle." They thought the king was going to work for them. But that's not the way it's going to be. They're going to work for the king. Isn't that how it always goes? Human beings fundamentally cannot create a government where the government works for the people. The people will always end up working for the government. That is just how it will, and that's what we're seeing here, even in the United States. We tried, and for a couple hundred years we've managed to do it, to have a system where the government worked for the people. And it was never perfect, but at least it functioned for a while. And we're seeing a total breakdown in that, and now the people have to work for the government. And it's only going to continue, because in the end, that's how human civilizations go. Well, they wanted the king to work for them, but they were going to end up working for the king. And that's how it always is. Always. It will always turn out to be that way. Because that's how human beings are. That's how human societies are. No matter how noble or well-intentioned the government may be when it's established, it will always inevitably turn against the people. It's always going to happen. Always has and always will. There's only one who can really be king. God wants to be king. Like, mankind needs a king. Okay, the issue here, and this is something that we have a problem with in our country today, our cultural mindset today, is that we need a king. Like mankind needs a king. God was showing the people throughout the era of the judges that they did need a king. He wanted to be that king. He's going to send them that king. There will someday be a king like this. There will someday be a king who serves the people. That's what Jesus' entire ministry was designed to show. But these people want a king like that, but it's never going to happen. Any human government, any human king, even David, who will be their best king, will have his moments where he goes astray. Now he will get back in line. David is a good king, not because he's perfect, but because when he makes his mistakes, when he goes off track and is imperfect, he goes back. He is willing to accept rebuke and repent and go back to where he should be. Which most kings don't. Most governments don't. Most people don't. Most humans don't. And so that's the problem that they're having here. They want the king to be like what they think he's going to be like. They want to be like the nations around them, and they want their king to work for them, but they're going to end up working for the king. And they don't see that coming. When Samuel heard all the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered, "Listen to them and give them a king." Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Everyone, go back to your town. We've got to find a king." The Israelites said, we always knew this was going to happen. Moses knew this was going to happen. In his farewell address to the people in Deuteronomy, as he is covering everything again, he says, this is Deuteronomy 17, starting in verse 14, "When you went to the land the Lord your God is giving you, and have taken possession of it, and settled in it, and you say, 'Let us set a king over us like all the nations around us,' be sure to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your own brothers." Well, they are going to do that. They're going to pick one of their own brothers. "Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not a brother Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the priests who are Levites. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his brothers, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel." So Moses knew they were going to want a king someday. All the way back in the days of Moses, before they even crossed the Jordan, they made provisions in their law for that day which would inevitably come when they would insist on having a king. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that was written hundreds of years later anyway. But I think, Moses, of course, was speaking with God's own insight in him. But even then, he probably knew these people would someday want a king. If anything, Moses may have been surprised it took as long as it did. Moses lived, when he's writing that, it's around 1406 BC, after the 40 years of wandering. This incident with Samuel, which will lead to the coronation of Saul, is around 1050 BC, so 350-ish years later. If anything, Moses may have been surprised to find out that it took them as long as it did to want a king. That it took him, he might have thought it would have happened sooner than 350 years later. So, he could see it coming, even without God's own prophetic insight, given to him as he was writing his farewell address to the people. I'm sure he could see it coming. He knew what they were like. He knew what they would eventually want to do. So the day has come. 350 or so years later, we're about the year 1050 BC here in the days of Samuel and Saul. The day has come. The Israelites have had enough. They've had enough of this anarchy. They've had enough of this upheaval, this constant turmoil going on, and they want a king. Now, to some degree, it's like they want order. Okay, to some degree, they want order, which is understandable. Okay, they've had 350 plus years of relative anarchy and constant turmoil, constant shifting and going, coming and going, constant changing in the sands of fortune and fate. And they want that to end. They want stability. They want that to end. And that's probably a good thing. But the problem is their motivation is wrong for two reasons. Their problem is twofold. One is that they want to be like the nations around them. That's their primary problem. They're parodying this king in their mind after the other nations around them. God wanted to be their king. And they ended up not wanting. That's why he said they rejected him. They ended up not wanting him to be their king. They wanted the nations around them. They wanted a king of the nations around them so they could have that kind of a kingdom. And two, they're under the impression this king is going to work for them. And that's not going to happen. Okay, the king does not work for the people. The people work for the king. And that is true throughout all of human history. And these people are going to have to learn that the hard way. They have some misguided belief that they appoint this king, this man as king, that they're going to be able to make that king do what they want him to do. They'll still kind of in a way be in charge. This is a tribal society. You have the 12 tribes that are living together in the same area of land. And these tribal leaders, who would be the people that are talking to Samuel here, they still want to maintain their own kind of influence. So they want to appoint a king, possibly from one of their own brethren, their tribal leaders, their tribal chieftains. They want to appoint a king that will do what they tell him to do. So they want the king to work for them, but that's not going to be the way it ends up being. The king, they're going to have to work for the king. So there's two incorrect assumptions that they're making here. They've got two mistakes in their thinking. They want to be like the nations around them, and they think that the king is going to work for them instead of them working for the king. They rejected God as their king. God wanted to be there. We need a king. Mankind needs a king. We have proven definitively over the course of time, over the course of history, that we cannot function without one. And that's just a fact. We may not like it, we don't want to say it, but it's true. We're even seeing that here in this country today as we devolve into anarchy and chaos, and we're just making the government more and more powerful because we just can't handle not having a king, not having a ruler. Mankind and God has designed us to be this way. This is how we are from our design. But God wants to be our king. And God wanted to be Israel's king. He made a covenant with them where he'd be the ruler and they would be the ruled, basically. They'd be the vassal state, and he'd be their suzerain, their ruler. And they rejected that. They wanted a human king. And they're going to have to deal with that. And so and again, Moses knew all along, God knew all along they would eventually want to do that. This was always part of the plan. This was always baked into the plan that God had for this nation, that eventually this would happen. So I think it's a mistake to say that God didn't want them to have a king. We often kind of talk about it that way, but that's not really accurate. God knew they would want a king someday. God knew that they needed a king. God wanted to be their king. But they rejected him as their king and wanted to set up their own human king. And God knew that was going to be a problem, that they were going to have to just go through this in order to learn better, learn otherwise. But it isn't really accurate to say that God didn't want them to have a king. That statement by itself is not really an accurate one to say. So.